racing? Because you did some bike racing. Tell me about that. How did that happen? What was your motivation?
Bike racing was, to some extent, an excuse for riding a bike more. I mean, I loved riding a bike. That was when I was happiest. There was nothing better to me than getting on a bike. You could work through things. Bike riding for me was a cool thing because you could ride it alone and kind of work through things in your mind, or you could ride it in a group as a social thing. And bike racing was so cool because it took me to other areas. I got to find new roads, new places to ride, new hills to suffer on. And it was a really good group of guys. Pedali Alpini was the club I joined. Our rival clubs would have been Belmont Bike Club and San Jose Bike Club. And I think in high school, kids kind of have a need also to compete, not just against other kids, but against other schools or clubs. And if you're not going to be into what your football team is doing, well, we could be up against people from Belmont Bike Club or San Jose Bike Club. We didn't hate them, but we claim we did. You do whatever you could to try and beat those guys. It really was a great excuse to get out and ride more. And I probably had an advantage because I could suffer better than a lot of people. It wasn't something that was really easy to me, but I didn't mind suffering. So going up hills, climbing, which was the big thing, I exploited my advantages where I could.
So maybe you can give me the years and describe some of the races and some of the atmosphere and some of the ambiance of the time.
The years would have been the early to mid 70s. It was different then than now because the juniors were very, very large fields. We would have 70 juniors in a field, and you had very, very few masters. The older guys just weren't all that many. That's something which I would really like to see turned around. It was not considered an elitist or kind of a rich person sport, and now you kind of worry that you have to be able to afford to bike race, and it didn't quite seem that way then. Good group of kids. You had Tom Ritchie, Steve Lundgren, Chris Haley, was it? I think Jim Gentis, who went on to Giro, Peter Johnson. Bill Robertson was quite the climber. There were a few of us who really were into the climbing. That would have been myself, Bill Robertson. Peter Johnson was climbing quite a bit then, which brings up something else about racing. I mean, as racers back then, we loved to climb. Climbing was our thing. We've got these beautiful areas to ride. And we always assumed that we were going to excel at any race where there were mountains. And I remember very well the first Junior Worlds trials, and we discovered that the guys back east, where they didn't have these big mountains, could climb really well. Basically, they trained better than we did. We just went out and rode. They did intervals, they had programs. We just went out and rode, and we thought that more hills and more miles was a good thing, and there were better ways to do it. So that was one way that our cycling culture was a bit different than theirs.
Let's get into the bike business now. How did this all come about? Clever name for the shop. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got the name and how you got in the business.
Well, I'd been in bicycling since I was 15 or so. Started a bike shop called Freedom Bike Shop. Guy gave me the opportunity to work there, and I love bikes, and so it was kind of a no-brainer. And like so many people, I worked for buying my stuff. Your parents didn't buy everything for you back then. Getting people on bikes was just something I really loved doing. I wanted other people to be infected with the same bike bug I had. That's really what it comes down to. I tried to escape the business. When I went to school, UC Santa Cruz, I majored in economics. Came pretty close to heading off in a career with land use economics, which would have been quite the field to get into. But I couldn't really escape the bike business. When the opportunity came to manage a shop in Belmont for a little while, I did that for 3 months, and then a small hole-in-the-wall shop became available in Redwood City, and I said, okay, I'm going to just buy that and go from there. The name Chain Reaction Bicycles was one that a friend of mine, best friend from back in college and before, Mark Alexander, who was also a great hill climber, came up with just kind of a fun thing. I can't remember what the situation was, but it was kind of like you file that away because that seems like a cool name. We started small. We had we started at 400 square feet, knocked out a wall to the business next door to us, took that over. And then that wasn't enough room, so we took over all the apartment buildings upstairs.
Where was this?
This was down the street across from Sequoia Station. I think it's a mattress place now or something. We literally, I wish I had pictures of this, we literally had bikes stored in bathtubs. I mean, we had stuff everywhere. And then this old building here became available, and we made the move to a much larger location and filled it very quickly. You first think, how will we ever deal with this much space? Nah, you fill it really quick.
So El Camino Real is just a great street. It's got a lot of traffic, and I'm sure that helps you for your business.
Well, it's easy to find. Demographically, this is not really the center of cycling. This isn't the best location as far as that goes. My Los Altos store is right in the middle of the cycling world. You can do rides from there and everything. But Redwood City is what I know, and it's not as expensive as some of the other areas, so it allows us to do things we couldn't do if we were paying $3 a square foot.
Okay, so what is your store's philosophy for helping customers? What are some words of wisdom after being in this business for so long that you could impart?
Probably the main thing is you're going to screw up from time to time and own up to the mistakes. Fix them. Don't pretend that you didn't do something wrong. Be as honest and straightforward with customers as you can. You know, don't lie, don't make up stories. It's always a tough one with new guys that you hire because, I mean, yeah, it would be nice if they didn't make mistakes, but you know, the best way to learn from mistakes and move on is if you admit to them and you learn from them. So as far as anything that, you know, I don't think that's something that makes any sense to customers probably or anything. As far as the customers are concerned, the main thing is we need to understand what their dream is, not ours. You and I might think the greatest thing in the world is a 110-mile ride to Santa Cruz and back. That's not the dream of the average person coming in the door. And we have to realize that their dream is more important than ours. Now, if we can expand their dream, that's the best thing in the world. If you can learn what they want to do and then get them to expand on that, that's wonderful, because then they don't mind buying a second bike and keeping one in the house in the hallway. They'll make sacrifices so that they can ride more. That's really the key.
How would you compare the bike business today to 20 years ago?
There's no slack. You really have to be careful about your buying decisions now. You've got to be much more focused on it as a business than you were before. Margins are much slimmer than they used to be. The cost of making mistakes, of having inventory that sits around is more expensive. Rent is more expensive, everything. You've really, really got to be careful. The barriers to entry, I suppose you would say, are higher. There's so many taxes and things that you didn't really have to deal with back then. 20 years ago, you could get into this and view it almost as an extension of a fun hobby. But if you tried that now, you would be wiped out so quickly. And we see that happen to people. If you don't approach it as a business, if you don't recognize your own limitations and work with them, it's really ruthless.
What would you say your customers most appreciate about your shop?
Probably the fact that whatever it is that's happened, you know, they can bring it in and we're not going to be judgmental. We're going to get them taken care of. We want them never to be scared to come in the door with something screwy. A lot of people are intimidated by going into a retail store, and they're scared. And we want to make sure, and I think we've done a pretty good job of making sure that nobody on the staff is going to scare and intimidate them. That's really the number one thing. They've got to be comfortable. The worst thing we can do is to treat somebody badly in a way that they give up on cycling. That's really the worst thing. because cycling is such a wonderful thing, and this is an issue. This is a reason why we benefit, I think, when we have better shops in the area. Some people think, oh, wouldn't it be great if you're the only really good shop in an area and everybody else kind of sucks and everybody comes to you? That's not good, because cycling to succeed needs kind of a critical mass of really good shops to keep things going. And if a shop in San Jose or Belmont or whatever does a really bad job and turns somebody off, we might never see that person riding a bike again. There's lots of things people can do besides ride a bike for fun. So we've really got to make sure, all shops really have to make sure to preserve that customer base, to enhance it, to keep people wanting to ride a bike and not do things that turn them off.
Okay, it seems like every shop has a specialty. Is there any area that you focus on? Road, racing, mountain bike?
It's always been road for me, which is a reflection of me personally, because my background is in road. I need to ride off-road more, but I'm so klutzy off-road. I have no idea why I can do such amazing things on a road bike and why I'm so klutzy at everything else in my life. It doesn't make sense, but it just is. But because of that, I mean, back in the 80s, when mountain bikes were really getting strong, we were known somewhat derisively as that road bike shop. And it never really bothered me because we were selling tons and tons of road bikes. But I would say road bikes are definitely the main thing that we're known for.
And any brands we should talk about?
Well, we've been aligned with Trek since almost the beginning of time. We started with Trek 25 years ago. Had an interesting experience there. I remember visiting Bicycle Outfitter way back when and seeing this new bike Trek in their windows and thinking those look really cool, and I wonder if that's something we could carry. And we contacted Trek, and their rep, Tom French, came by. I don't know if Tom French is on your list or not, but he was a local, he was involved with Kestrel and other things. And he turned us down. He said that we weren't really the type of shop that Trek was looking for. And this is actually a really important thing, because I never ever forgot that. When you talk about things that motivate you to be better and kind of prove to somebody that they're wrong, I mean, he couldn't have chosen better words to do that to me. He probably had no idea at the time, but that really got to me. Now, he moved on, and 6 months later, they got a rep named Harry Spahar, who went on to become the product manager at Trek, and very well known in the industry. And we got signed up immediately as a Trek dealer with him. He saw something in us that made sense, and we've been very well connected with the company ever since. We've been involved in product meetings back there. It's been just a phenomenal company. I mean, we have relationships with people who have been there as long as we have. How many bike companies have employees who have been there over 20 years? And Trek has tons of them. When they say that it's all about relationships, I mean, it really is. That really does count. When I sell a Trek, I know the company that's standing behind it. I don't have to tell somebody if something comes in screwy that, well, we'll have to have the rep take a look at it. We know what's going on. Trek trusts us. It's worked out very well.